Last week, Tuesday, Boeing announced that it was delaying its launch of the crewed flight test mission for NASA after discovering some pretty serious problems with the Starliner spacecraft. First, Boeing discovered that tape used to protect wiring throughout the capsule was found to have a flammable component under the right circumstances. Removing the tape would possibly mean damaging the wires, and so another solution is being worked on. Second, the soft links between the Starliner and its parachutes were found to not withstand as much stress as once believed due to incorrect measurements. This issue is also still being worked on. No solution was given. Boeing's commercial crew manager, Mark Nappy, stated that these problems were brought to the company's CEO for a decision on how to move forward, which is not a great look for the company once believed to lap SpaceX in developing a crew-rated system. All right, so Boeing does not have a really solid, has run into some more problems, which has kind of been the MO for the Starliner program. And did you kind of like digest anything of the news like when it came out? Because it was kind of it was like it was announced. I think it was announced that day that there was going to be a press conference, and then it was like delayed, and it was like towards the end of the day, and it was like kind of one of those things like, okay, they're trying to drop this right at the end of the day to like no one gets articles out. Right. But like when you drop news that big,
so it gets rolled over.
People work overtime get an article out. So did you like digest any of the news that like what happened, or like what's your thoughts on like hearing that they're delaying again?
I digested all the moaning from the team.
The Slack channel was alive during that press conference. It was mostly me.
Just the
it's mostly me, but it was alive.
That's really the only thing. I didn't deep dive into it. Like everybody else who's watching and listening to this now, you should stay tuned to get your news here. So that's what I'm doing.
Oh, okay. So let me explain it to you then.
No, but you should definitely give it a good explanation. But yeah, the only thing I digested was that it was like a lot of disappointment in the entire industry.
Yeah, so it wasn't a surprise to get we were coming up on a July launch temp possibly of CFT. There were rumors of it being delayed already. So when I think when I originally saw there was going to be a press conference on an update, it's not the first time they've done that. And so it wasn't really that surprising. It was just the surprising part was like it was kind of like it was like all of a sudden, oh, we're doing a press conference today, rather than like it was last time. I think it was like a week ahead they announced it, rather than like it was probably a day beforehand, I think. They announced it, and so we're going like, okay, so they're delaying it. Obvious, they're gonna go to the fall. Probably like October sometime or whatever, like, I don't know, whenever the next time the ISS has an opening, which these days is actually quite difficult. And so they kind of they started out the press conference with, today's about communication. And tomorrow is when we start working on the problems. And when you say that, it's like, oh, this is not like a simple, we're still working a solution we're still working a problem from the previous issue, and we're just going to delay. No, this is a quite serious thing. First off, the first issue was with the tape. So the way that it was explained by Mark Nappy was that pretty much wherever they have wiring in the spacecraft, it's not just exposed wires. It's like wrapped in a tape to kind of like protect it. Like if you're like when they're working inside of it or whatever, they don't want to like bump it with something or whatever.
Or if it did catch fire, hopefully that would be sort of something that would stop it from continuing to catch on fire.
Well,
that's my understanding of like
everything you put in a spacecraft isn't supposed to be able to catch fire. It's
right.
It's supposed to not be flammable, and I don't know what they tested or what happened, but there's a certain scenario where a high enough voltage goes through a wire, and he kind of explained, and I kind of mentioned this in a text message, but I was like decompressing throughout it, because Mark Nappy it was Mark Nappy. It was either Mark Nappy or it was Steve Stitch, who's the commercial crew. I think he's a commercial crew program manager for NASA. One of them was explaining like what it would take to make it start fire. It's like you have a pure oxygen environment, and you have a high enough voltage, and you have some sort of ignition. And I'm sitting there just like, guys, we've like this is Apollo 1. Like this happened. Like astronauts have died
Right.
already from this sort of scenario. So like this is not like oh well if it could happen. Like it's happened. It's happened before. So I'm not saying it will. Again, I'm just saying like they kind of explained the entire setup of Apollo 1, which was extremely tragic back in the 60s and delayed the program for years. So it's not the tape itself, from what they explained. It's the adhesive of the tape that is flammable, apparently. And I remember he mentioned the tape, and of course questions afterwards, and they kind of, I'll be honest, Boeing did not have a good day with questions. Nappy had some harsh questions sent towards them, and which is understandable. But we pretty much then explained that like, well, we can't really remove the tape because it would be like really time consuming and it might damage the wires, so you might have to just like rewire everything. Which, if you think of anything that's as complex as a spacecraft, you have a lot of wires. That
sounds
really
awful. I hate rewiring the back of the TV.
Yeah, like rewiring it would not be an option. Like that, just you'd be delayed for another year.
That
like,
sounds awful.
There's just as you're rebuilding the spacecraft, pretty much at that point.
Right.
So they're looking at. I think that what they're looking at is probably putting some sort of insulator over the top. But apparently, you might not have to do it over every wire because some wires won't have enough voltage through the wires to like cause a fire. Like a wire going to like a light probably won't have as much voltage as like something that's like powering a screen.
Yeah. But yeah, I would imagine it's like a power or just any kind of power adapter.
Yeah, voltage, current, amperage. I don't know. I'm not an electrical engineer.
Yeah.
Whichever one that could cause a fire. So I'm just going to use those. I know it's bad. I'm just going to use. I might use those 3 interchangeable, but because I don't exactly know like which one would actually cause the fire. So yeah, that's a problem that they have to come up with, and then have to come up with a solution for. They didn't propose any solutions during the press conference. And then the second one, which is, I cannot tell which one of these is more serious. I think in my article I mentioned that this one was the most serious one, but now thinking back, I really don't know which one is more serious than the other one. I think they're both pretty serious. This one has to do with the soft links on the parachute system. So the parachute system, I'll try to explain this one. It's not like this is a complex situation. It's just like you kind of have to understand what these things are. You have, of course, the canopies of the parachute, which is the big orange stuff that expands and drags on the atmosphere that slows you down. Then you have the harnesses that go from the canopy to the spacecraft. There's like, it sounded like they said there was 50 of them, of those like wiring, those cords, harnesses that go from the canopy down to the spacecraft.
It's basically the string that's holding the parachute.
Yeah, and so they clump up a couple of these cords on these things called soft links. So they're called soft link because they link the cords to the hard point of the Starliner spacecraft. They're soft because they're not hard. They're like a cloth-like material. So these apparently these are built by I think it's like airspace or something, I think is what they're called. I will quickly check the soft link. Come on, tell me. Airborne Systems, that's what it's called.
This is a great time to tell you about our sponsor.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
SpaceExplorer.com is
sponsored by nobody.
SpaceExplorer.com. So yeah, Airborne Systems is the subcontractor for Starliner that produces the parachutes. And so apparently something didn't happen correctly when they were registering like how much stress they can take during development, and it's a much lower value than originally expected. So you might ask, why did OFT 1 and 2 successfully descend on a parachute? Jared, ask that question. Go.
So why did 1 and 2 descend correctly with no issues, and why didn't they find this out then?
I thank you for asking that question, Jared. The reason why is because similar to Apollo, similar to Dragon, these crew systems are designed to descend with 4 parachutes, but has to be able to safely descend with 3. so they can lose an entire parachute and still descend safely. Because of that redundancy, when OFT 1 and 2 landed, they had 4 great parachutes. They didn't have any parachute issues. I don't remember if it was a Dragon or if it was a Starliner that had like a slow to open chute. But I think it was Starliner. But all 4 parachutes did open. So the stress on those softlings was below the limit that it can hold because it has 4 instead of 3. So the failure point is if there's one chute out, so you have 3 chutes, and you have like a strong gust of wind or something like that that kind of pulls them harder than normal, which is within a reasonable doubt that would happen. Like if there's a shootout, there's a reasonable doubt that there would be a strong gust of wind that could put more stress on the softlings. So that put it pretty much the risk level that was assessed to this certain part was above the limit that they were allowed to go over, which means they have to fix the problem. They have to redesign it. They can't fly humans on it. It's not crew rated. It won't be crew rated. It's not even rated. It technically wouldn't even be rated to fly uncrewed with that system. So that's a big for Boeing. And I gotta give it to Boeing for this because this was Memorial Day week, so the problems were brought to the attention the week before Memorial Day weekend, and the press conference happened that Thursday after Memorial Day weekend. Like this was within a week of the problems being solved when they had the press conference. Much better than the last time we had an update, where there was these problems they've known for like months or years that all of a sudden like showed up, like, oh, we're delaying it because of this. Yeah, we've known for a while.
Yeah.
Like we have to do this, and now which actually was a parachute test. So I wonder if they discovered during that parachute test. But I gotta give it to them. It was in a week that they actually shared it with us rather than like waiting a while to share it.
So I gotta say, I feel like both of these are pretty routine things that you would. These feel like checkpoints that are pretty like. They're obviously massive checkpoints, but I feel like they're pretty basic at this point in our history of creating rockets with capsules. I feel like these are checkpoints that would have been on the checklist. Like you said. I mean, you said Apollo 1, right? So these have been on the checklist for quite some time.
That's a valid point to make. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to say anything because I'm not an aerospace engineer. I'm not an engineer at all.
I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying these feel. I'm definitely not saying it's easy. I'm just saying I feel like these are checkpoints that have. These would have been like the OG of checkpoints. Like these are in that original list of like, hey, these are the checkpoints that we have to hit in order for this to work.
It's one of those things that I'm a little.
This is not new technology. It's not new technology. Obviously it is new technology, but it's not like it's not
new technology, but it's not.
Let's say SLS, right?
Yeah, it's like
or even Starship. It's not completely new.
It's kind of like one of those things where like, I'm wondering like how it made it this far without notice. That's like what I'm like.
Yes,
that's where I'm weirded out. Like, how did it make it? Years of development, and all of a sudden they discovered that this tape is flammable, or this tape adhesive is flammable, or the parachute system isn't rated.
It's like if you made a shoe nowadays, and you're like, okay, well, we need shoelaces, duh, right? So put shoelaces in, and then you're like you're about to launch and like sell the shoe, but you're like, wait a minute, our shoelaces don't actually tie.
Well, yeah, as soon as you try to tie them, they just rip apart.
Yeah.
Like, it's I don't know. The thing that it's one of these things, like Boeing has had a lot of flops the past like decade. Like I mean, you have 737. Like you have 737 Max. You have all these other like problems have like with Starliner that have popped up, and the thing that kind of concerned a lot of us, and props to. So one of the rough questions that Nappy had to answer was from Christian Davenport, who's the space reporter from Washington Post. And I'll bring this question up every time because it was such a great question. Something that like I just would never have caught. Every single time that Boeing has come up with like a delay with Starliner, they've always mentioned how like dedicated they are to the mission and that they're going to fix the problem. They're going to get back on track. They're going to launch it. And they didn't mention this time. Now, I think that's more of a flare. I don't think the wording, like the dropping of the wording, doesn't mean. I don't think that means anything at all. Like, I think Nappy and the Boeing Starliner team are extremely dedicated to getting this thing launched and fixed and on time and safe. And most importantly, safe. Like, make sure that there's no problems, especially when you're dealing with crew. The thing that I think there's, of course, when Davenport asked the question, I did one of those things where I pushed back from my desk and I go oh, good job, Davenport. That was one of those, when you see those questions, you're just I'm envy of him and I wish I asked that question. He instantly came out oh, that's not what I meant. Of course we're dedicated on all stuff. And there's a statement right after the press conference that reiterated that they're dedicated, committed, and it's their top priority. The thing that concerns me is that they had to go to this. Concerns me. The thing that concerns me has to go to that they went to the CEO. It mentioned in the press release that they, we brought this to the CEO of Boeing, and it was talked about paths forward. That the CEO of Boeing, at least the way I look at the company, because Boeing is such a large company, the CEO isn't there's no way the CEO can be hands on everywhere. There's just no way, right?
Sure.
You have commercial airlines, you have defense, you have missile systems, you have a launcher. They own part of ULA. They have, of course, then the Starliner system and satellites, and they do everything. So bringing this problem to the CEO without solutions, that they brought it to them without solutions, and they asked for a path forward, seems concerning of how that they don't know how to fix the problems. Not how they're going to solve the problem is going to be really, really costly, really long, and all this, of course, is on the paycheck of Boeing. Boeing doesn't get paid extra.
Right.
It's a fixed price contract. They got paid. There's no more, until they launch until they launch crew, they don't get paid anymore. So something along those lines. So any sort of push out, this is Boeing's dime to fix this problem for the third time now, because we've had, OFT had issues with the mission elapsed timer, and then they had the mapping of the thrusters on the service module and spacecraft. So OFT2 was launched on Boeing's dime, which then had a valve issue. That we all remember the valve issue from OFT2. They actually had another failed valve. They said that they've gone to it. It wasn't they have a solution apparently for it, or they just have another failed valve. Who knows? So they've had to fix that, and now which delayed OFT2 more, which delayed CFT, which is just adding on how much this is costing. And we're getting to the point where if the Boeing Crew 1 mission does not launch fall of 2024, SpaceX is going to start picking up slack and launching more. SpaceX will have to literally start picking up Boeing missions, or we'll get to the point where Boeing will then be the only launch provider towards the end of the ISS lifespan. Because right now all the crew rotation missions have been awarded. All the additional missions that would have gone to either, if Boeing and SpaceX would have launched around the same time, their first crewed missions, they would have been split between the two probably. They've all been awarded to SpaceX because Boeing hasn't even been able to launch the first one. So we're getting to the point where more delays to Boeing is putting to the jeopardy of Boeing even going to be able to meet their contractual obligations. I'm sure they'll do it in a way, because right now we're only launching on SpaceX anyways. So if SpaceX just keeps launching, and then towards the end of ISS, it's just Boeing. Up to NASA if they feel comfortable with that. Of course, it's not like SpaceX will go away. They'll still have Crew Dragon. It's just they won't have, lined up crew rotation missions. So if there's anything wrong with Boeing, they could always, purchase an additional SpaceX mission. So
Yeah, it just seems like it's a leadership issue with that particular program, and it seems like
it's usually
that's
how when
usually
things
where
like
it
this kind of
always.
go. Like it's usually a leadership. Like there's no way like Boeing is like
Yeah,
engineering.
it just seems like it's the wrong person for the job, or too many cooks in the kitchen, or whatever the leadership issue is. Input X issue.
Yeah,
But they just need to maybe boot that person out and
it's just like who would you
or
boot? Because I
return.
mean, Mark Nappy is an amazing.
I have no idea.
Like Mark Nappy's great. Like it's not his problem. I mean, like this is like he's a manager. He's a program manager. He's
Right.
not really like an engineering manager. So like it would be someone lower down. Is it someone higher up? Like I don't know the hierarchy of the Starliner program. We just know that Mark Nappy is the commercial
Yeah.
crew, like program manager. So I just know that he oversees it, and it's below him. So and NASA, is on board. I mean they haven't shown any sort of slight like reluctancy to supporting.
Yeah,
Boeing.
they're like behind them 100% still.
Boeing's the best friend like in the agency.
Yeah.
If you want to have issues with the spacecraft, you want to have a contract with NASA because they'll stand by you 100%. DoD will drop you in a heartbeat, but NASA will stand by your side when you're going through it. So when it comes to when Boeing can launch next, so it was a July launch window right now. I think the next one is in the fall timeline ish. It depends on, when what are we on now? Crew 7 would be launched in the fall. So when Crew 7 launches, when there's if there's a Northrop Grumman CRS mission end of the year, when that launches. Is there an Axiom 3 mission launching this year? And then finally is I'm trying to think. I think when Crew 6 comes down, yeah, you just gotta line up with having an available IDA port.
Yeah, the ISS is like a club right now.
It is. It's
like,
pumping. I mean, we had a lot.
You got to get in line.
Yeah, and
you got to dress the best
because
you pay the door guy.
Yeah, you got to get in. Yeah, I know a guy in there. Trust me, I know the manager. Because Boeing CFT is a flight test. It's not a rotation mission. It kind of get the bottom rung of like when they get priority.
Sure.
Resupply and crew rotations will get priority. I'm sure if it gets to a point, NASA would prioritize a CFT over an Axiom mission, just because Axiom stays for a week, so they can be a little more flexible when they launch, versus a crew rotation, which is like they're on regular 6-month schedules. So like you miss one, and you're just like, okay, you're staying on the 6 months till the next one. Why not?
Right.
Like it happened with the MS-22. So it just Boeing is kind of going through it with trying to find the ability to like just get a spacecraft ready to launch, and then launch. For timeline wise, what Boeing they wouldn't commit to any sort of timeline for when they can launch. It was the ISS program manager that kind of mentioned fall, but if I'm a betting man, which I'm not unless I'm in Vegas, or in any casino, I would be saying like probably winter. The spring is probably a way better time, but spring is probably
I was gonna say I'm saying 24.
I wouldn't be surprised.
It's not happening until 24
at all.
Yeah.
So it's just one of these things that's just like, man, Boeing almost won the entire commercial crew program. Like they almost were the sole provider of
Dude,
of
can you
this
imagine?
program. Like,
get your shit together.
It's just one of those things where it just baffles me how big of a ball drop Boeing has done with Starliner. Like this will go now. It's just like a huge just ball drop, because after commercial crew, like every commercial crew, I mean, technically they could launch to any commercial space station after this because they're all using the International Docking Adapter.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're all almost every space station that's partnered with, a crew capsule of some sort. I mean, a lot of them are partnered with SpaceX or Dream Chaser. So, which is funny.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the only one that's really partnered with Dream Chaser is Sear Space's program, but it's like they've chose their companion, and Boeing seems to have like left out of the ability to get on the commercial crew or the commercial space station team somewhere. And it seems like this is going to be pretty much a one and done, program where you finally get the launch, you do your I think it's 6 missions, 5 or 6 missions, and you're done. Like there's no more Starliner, which sucks for the people who built it, because it apparently was. I mean, it's a pretty cool spacecraft. Like on the inside, like it looks. I mean, it's has a lot of. It's not as sexy as a Dragon. Like no one has the sex appeal as SpaceX, but it has that nostalgia, like old space feel, but like upgraded. Like it's still cool. Like it's still like that. Like the shuttle's still cool, but even though it's old, it's still cool. And that's not the inside of like Dragon, like or like Starliner. Like it looks a little dated, but it's still cool. So hopefully,
but more vintage than dated, right? It's like vintage.
Yeah, like I think the displays are based off of the 737 Max, and like there's a lot of shuttle stuff that's thrown in there, and
that's cool.
Like they pulled a lot of stuff from their other programs done in the Starliner. It's just kind of like, man, like you guys, like it just can't catch a break of issues, and wherever that problem is, like how something goes for years unnoticed, like that has to be fixed, because you really can't have something that has been going on for all these years and not found.